in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's
The Bitchspot Report. Welcome to the Bitchspot Report, the conservative atheist podcast that's not afraid to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Every week, your hosts, Cephas and Mike, will take on the latest religious and political news and examine the world around us from a distinctly conservative and skeptical perspective. Join us now for this episode of the Bitchspot Report. Oh look, it's those crazy conservative atheists and their weekly podcast. Welcome to episode 70 of the Bitchspot Report podcast, where actual conservatives who are actual atheists blather on for about 90 minutes every Friday, discussing the news of the day and laughing at the religious and political idiots. This week, we're having another all-news show. The Southern Democrats are in a race to the stupid line with Southern Republicans. Idiots in Colorado voted for Gordon Klingenschmitt, and we can't understand why. We spend a lot of time talking about the failure of religion in America, with a couple stories about churches closing, churches combining, and churches shutting down their charitable operations. Plus, Hobby Lobby, we had to get to it eventually, and so the shitstorm begins. Hang out with us. This ought to be fun.
Yes, it will be.
So how you doing?
Doing pretty good. I think I might be suffering some from brain damage. I've been going through this, trying to get this last Illuminati show together, and I've gone through so much biblical prophecy stuff. I just want to bang my head. And it's not so much the I guess what we call mainstream, if there's such a term for them. I mean, I'm being generous, but I've been digging into this Joshua Abraham character, and this guy's out there, and I've talked about him before, and I started following up on his air quotes here facts. I look him up, and I'm not even finding mainstream like news or anything on Wikipedia. All the stuff he's done is coming off of obscure, and I'm talking obscure biblical prophecy sites, obscure Illuminati bad sites. The guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, well, that's most of them, though.
True. I mean, I've gone through there's that guy, Randy Moggins, and all his shows have been like, he'll bring on guests. I forget some of the guests he's had on, but they'll sit around, talk for 10, 20 minutes, maybe talk some news and then go into their show. And a lot of those shows are actually not even informative because and maybe it might be a news event. You'll find them talking about it and you're going, well, what does this have to do with end times? And, a lot of times they won't even cite any biblical verses, which they usually do. They love to throw out Genesis 3:16, and it says here, and of course what they say from the Bible versus what they're talking about in real life hardly ever matches, but at least ways they give you some direction if you wanted to do some more research. I mean, I gotta give them credit. They're passionate about their subject, but you almost have to support your argument, which they really don't. But at least ways, I mean, when I went through some of the Morgan stuff, I could find the Bible verses that they refer to, even if they didn't tell you what chapter verse. I mean, you could type it in, boom, up it comes. Okay, so I know that they're reading a book and saying, getting their information. They're actually, I'm going to say they're more honest about their beliefs than this Joshua Abraham. He's making stuff up whole cloth. And the amazing thing is, I can't see what he's doing it for. I mean, it's always for money. I mean, that's all these guys are in for is, show me the dollar. I mean, even the mainstream guys are they're selling CDs, books, tapes, they go to conferences, hey, see us at such and such, conference, it's only $5,000 to get in, that type of stuff. This guy's not selling anything and he's getting airplay. I mean, it kind of pisses me off a little bit because, he's been on Coast to Coast AM, I believe twice, maybe 3 times. And then all he does is, he rambles on. There's always that, since his dad wrote the None Dare Call It Conspiracy book, I mean, he's kind of like the Kardashians of the biblical prophecy world, And, it's like, well, this is really bullshit because now, Stuart Robbins, who does the pseudo-astronomy podcast, has taken Mike Barra to task on that lunar ziggurat. I mean, if you're not familiar with it, there was a photo it looks like a ziggurat on the surface of the moon. And of course, everybody in the ancient aliens, ancient civilization group thought, oh, more proof. And Robbins tore it all to shreds. He found the actual photos. He laid everything out. He did everything mathematically on top of it and disproved it. Well, Barra took to an online campaign calling him he's just a NASA shill and all this kind of stuff. And supposedly Robbins was supposed to get on Coast to Coast AM to debate Mike Barra. That hasn't happened. What the fuck? Here's a guy who, he's got it debunked. Now granted, I would almost bet George Norrie or whoever runs Coast to Coast AM doesn't want debunkers on their show.
Of course not.
Just doesn't work well, for their format. But it was certainly, at least Robbins has a legitimate reason to get on that show because it's been offered. Norrie's people said, yeah, we'll get you on. But he hasn't yet. But this guy, his only credential is that his dad wrote this famous book. And, even on top of it, I don't see how this guy's making money unless it has something to do with keeping that book alive. I don't know how copyrights work because that book's going to be about 50 years. I don't know if it's at the end of a cycle that he has to renew the copyright or extend the, whatever, or it falls into public domain. Last I remember, I think it was 50 years and then it's 25 and 25 for books, I think. So, he may be trying to drum up sales. Maybe this is, his inheritance is based on the royalties from this book. So, he's gonna promote it on these different shows because he's been on a whole bunch. He's been on Coast to Coast. He's been on Alex Jones. There's that, Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis. He's been on podcasts. He's been on all sorts of stuff. I have to think, because it's always money driven, that this guy is trying to keep the book alive. Probably how he makes his money, because it sounds like he hasn't had a job since 2008.
Well, I mean, you can always look at the real obvious solution. The guy's insane.
Well, definitely. That's the obvious.
It's not always just money. Sometimes these people are just fucking crazy. And they're just out there talking to the voices in their heads, and people like George Norrie and all the rest of these other conspiracy Looney Tunes are only too happy to give them a forum.
Oh, yeah.
Because it gets them ratings and they get money. So yeah, they want to get the craziest people on that they possibly can because it gets people to listen.
Yeah. That could very well be it. But you know what? With this guy talks. He lost his construction job and then spent 3 months in his car learning the King James Bible. And I think he did it. I'm not sure if he did it in Florida or California. So he baked his brain outside in a parking lot as he's reading this Bible. I mean, he's got to have done something. And like I said, I have to think he's doing something. It has something to do with money. There's got to be a money angle to it. The way he talks, he hasn't had a job in 7 years. It's like,
well, I'm sure he's getting welfare.
Probably. And like I said, I think he may be living off of the royalties off the book because it's still being sold. I mean, you can still buy it. I'm not going to tell you where. I'm not going to tell listeners. I don't want to promote it.
Amazon. You can buy everything at Amazon.
Right. But, I do have a PDF version of it. So if anybody who wants to see it and actually wants to look into this book, let me know. I'll put it up somewhere. You can download it for free. Don't spend any money for this thing.
Yeah, I mean, never support the crazies. Just right. Don't do it.
Right.
Or you can always go to a used bookstore and buy it there because they don't get a penny off of that.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And there's hundreds of copies out there, and like again, it's a terrible book. It's like a little paperback. It's not even like anything major. It's a lot of bitching about communists and Richard Nixon. I mean, that's really what the book is all about. We don't like communists and we don't like Richard Nixon.
Oh, poor baby.
Yeah. That's probably what's keeping him afloat. So I think he may want to be trying to drum up business, because every interview he's on, he mentions that book and his father in that book. And I mean, it sounds like it's a very cheap, easy way for him to promote it. Like I said, he might get a royalty still. He may own or maybe part owner of the estate that still owns 50% of the book, because it was written by two guys, his father and another guy. So I'm thinking that's what he's doing. He's trying to drum up extra royalties for this book so he can do whatever. the guy needs medical help. I mean, definitely. He says, do the research. Okay, I did the research. You're full of shit.
Yep.
You know? I love it how he says that there's a bloodline going right from Obama to the kings of Babylon.
Sure there is.
And it's just so funny. And it's like, I mean, if we brought him on this show, I mean, you tear him apart on the Bible stuff, and I tear him apart on the history stuff, because there's this chain from the U.S. presidents to England to Spain to Italy to
Mars.
Yeah. And then it goes through Egypt and Babylon. And I mean, I just went through a whole bunch of Egyptian history, and I know for a fact that Egyptians never mingled outside of their borders. It was very important for the Egyptians to stay within Egypt. There was a belief that if you were buried outside of Egypt, you would be a lost entity. If your body's brought to Egypt and buried there and mummified properly and gone through that, you live an eternal life. So there was very little outside interactions with the Egyptians. There were a few forays. They had most of what they needed. It just there was just like, I think gold was important for them, and turquoise. And that was the only time they would foray out of Egypt to acquire these things. Yeah, because they had a direct line to forget which one. I forget if it was frankincense or myrrh. It was one of those two that were important for the mummification. They had a direct connection for that, so they didn't have to leave Egypt to acquire that. And they had deals with the Lebanese for wood and all that kind of stuff. It was really very important for them to stay within the sight of the Nile, basically. So there was very little chance a bloodline could go from Babylon to Egypt to Italy. There was no interaction on that level. That debunked it right there. And I can go into all the other bloodlines that have been broken. He talks about the British bloodline. He talks about the Windsors. Well, the Windsors weren't the only bloodline of royalty. There was the Plantagenets, the Tudors, all the others, you know. He doesn't get it. And when I do look up what he says, the first page isn't Wikipedia or something legitimate or a legitimate journal. It's always somebody else's crazy site.
Yeah.
Like I said, and he goes into the biblical prophecy stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, I would say even the mainstream guys would say, get out of here, kid. You're an idiot.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, so, and that's my thing. Hey, I've rambled on long enough on that.
Yeah, we'd never bring him on here because it wouldn't matter what we took apart and what we showed him was wrong. He'd never change his mind anyway. Just like the theists. He's just crazy.
Yeah. Oh, so, definitely.
Well, anyway, before we get going on the news, I wanted to clarify something to head off any potential problems. This week on Cognitive Dissonance, they apologized for the story of the 800 dead babies they found in the septic tank. And apparently, after the fact, somebody came out and there were some parts of the story that were incorrect. And, I mean, of course, I completely understand their desire to go back and correct themselves. I wanted to clarify our position on stories that may turn out later to be wrong. We only respond to stories. We are not reporters ourselves. We don't have teams of crack researchers to send out and verify these stories. We just react to the stories that are already in the news. Most of these times, these stories just start a discussion. We go off on tangents and talk about things, just ideas caused by these stories. So we're not really just talking about these stories. We're talking about ideas and concepts. And we've said in the past that, hey, if we're not confident about a story and we think people ought to be skeptical, we'll absolutely tell you that. But it's not our fault if the news media screws up and gets it wrong. We're just reacting to what they have to say, whether the story is correct or not. Right. So I don't want anybody to come back and call us on it and go, oh, hey, you reported on a story that turned out to be incorrect. Because, well, yeah, because it was in the news and that's what the news is for. That's why it's called And Now the News.
Right. Well, I was just going to say, yeah, I know with myself, and I know Cephas does the same thing. I mean, when we see these stories, I think for me, I mean, it's maybe the rare moments where I do pray that we got a good story here and it's legitimate and we'll comment on it. It is a crapshoot. I mean, the news media messes up, and certainly, there's people with agendas who want to press forward, they want the Catholics to sound bad, so they may make up a story. That's the danger. I think the danger of what we do, and we do try our best to look at the story, if it does seem fishy, we'll say, yeah, this doesn't sound right, but here's what the news is saying. We try our best, and sometimes the social justice warriors out there who wants to fake a story or manipulate a real story to some nefarious end, whatever they're doing, we just read it. It pops up. Oh, this is funny. This is sad. This is scary. This is, horrible. We'll report on it, and we keep our fingers crossed that it isn't a total hoax or, a fabrication.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily worried about fabrications, but let's be honest. We've got stories out there that we're trying to be time sensitive on, and so we don't have time to wait for these things to just kind of play out. We're just saying, hey, this is what's in the news this week. Here's what we're going to talk about. And if next week we find out that it was all just complete bullshit, well, then it was. But we still talked about what was in the news. And, we're not making any claims about the veracity or the truth behind these stories. We're just reporting on the stories themselves.
Yeah.
And I really bring this up because there's this one jerk on my blog who, the guy doesn't have a blog himself. He just runs around to all the other blogs he can find and essentially expects all the blogs to be peer-reviewed journals. He has honestly in comments said, well, where's the study that you went out and conducted before you came to this opinion? Fuck you, dude. It's a fucking opinion, If you don't like it, don't read it. I don't care. But there are people out there who really get things stuck up their ass where everything has to be just perfect all the time. And if it's not, they're just going to bitch and whine about it. So I just wanted to kind of clear the air and get that out there. And if they still are going to be out there bitching and whining and pissing and moaning, well,
that's their problem.
Yeah, screw you people. I don't need you. Yeah. So anyway, anything else before we move on to the news?
Let's move on to the news.
Okay. And now the news.
A man of faith, Jimmy Carter ran for president with conviction.
Praising God is praising God for who God is.
All these years on, Republicans have done a better job connecting with voters on issues of faith.
You're not talking about the things you can see.
That's something a younger generation of Southern Democrats is fighting to change. Carter's grandson, State Senator Jason Carter, is running for governor of Georgia.
For me, it's incredibly important to me personally. It drives who I am, it drives what I do and how I make decisions.
He's open about his faith. So is Michelle Nunn.
I remember as a child going to church with my mom.
The daughter of former Senator Sam Nunn. She's running for Congress in Georgia.
When I tell my own story, talking about my faith and my values is a part of how I tell who I am and what I want to do as a future political leader and as senator.
Political parties know religion can broaden support and bring in rural voters, especially in southern states, the most religious in the country.
For voters who might be persuadable, those who might be in the middle, for whom faith is actually an issue of importance, it might actually help to give the Democratic candidate a second look.
Still, faith isn't something all Southern Democrats publicly embrace.
Not just one of us, all of us.
During campaign stops, Kentucky Senate candidate Allison Lonergan Grimes rarely mentions her Catholic upbringing, a contrast to other Democrats.
In the same church where they said I do.
And Republicans across the South. Alex Sands, The Associated Press, Plains, Georgia.
We all know the Republican Party is the party of God, but we may have to expand that to include Southern Democrats who are working hard to convince voters that Democrats can fling religious shit just as well as the Republicans. A group of Southern religious Democrats are aiming to reclaim the religious vote in the South. According to the 2012 Democratic platform, we know that our nation, our communities, and our lives are made vastly stronger and richer by faith and the countless acts of justice and mercy it inspires. Fuck, now we got two of them.
Didn't these guys learn from the Republicans the fucked up bullshit that comes out of their mouths? And now they want to be like them? I might even just say I'm a libertarian because, these two parties, they're not into representing their constituents. They just want to give votes.
Well, that's all any party wants to get.
Right.
Libertarians are no different. They don't represent people either.
Right. But it's like, I may have just spoke too soon, and then there'd be the crazy religious libertarians. So I'm like, come on. Don't you listen? Okay. I just figured out. They don't pay any attention to what's going on in the real world. They don't watch the news and watch the Klingenschmitts, going apeshit over atheists and want them to get all exercised. I mean, I didn't send that story in. That's kind of like a kind of recent thing. It's like, what's wrong with the Republican Party is that they got these religious wingnuts who will say whatever bullshit they can to scare their constituents into voting for them, because if you don't, the evil Democrats will eat your children and turn you into atheists. You want to be like that? I mean, fuck you people.
Well, you got to remember, this is just a race to the bottom. They're trying to appeal to the stupidest people in the nation. I mean, the Democrats are trying to outstupid the Republicans when it comes to religion. I mean, they already do that on everything else. They're just going for like the moron trifecta here.
Definitely. Michigan's getting ready for their primaries. We'll be talking about Dr. Chaps here in a little bit. I mean, I'm seeing these little stories popping up that Mars is the same temperature as Earth, and they don't have coal mines, but they're the same, so global warming is fake. And this is coming out of the GOP. I don't really know what they're doing. I mean, I used to think I think I kind of had an idea what they're doing, but they're appealing to the dumbest of the dumb. They're appealing not just to the average American, they're appealing to the below average American.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I've been going through this, this Illuminati stuff. These are people who believe in the weirdest shit, and none of it's factual. There's no facts whatsoever in anything these guys have said. Like, we've all lost our collective reasons left, the reason caught the bus and went to Canada or something like that. None of this is making sense to me anymore.
Yeah, but you say it like the Republicans are the only fucking crazies out there. They're all crazy. That's the thing. And we gotta remember that the current GOP is the way it is because of Nixon's Southern strategy, where Nixon tried to attract the religious Southern Democrats into abandoning the Democratic Party over issues like, abortion and civil rights. So the South went from voting entirely Democrat to voting almost entirely Republican. So now the Democrats are going, oh, look, more voters that we can go after. How do we go after these people? Well, the only thing they give a fuck about is God, guns, and gays. And so that's what the Democrats are going to try for. They're only doing this for political reasons. They don't give a shit about these people.
I know. Definitely, but the crazies kept their mouths shut. The Democrats, the Republicans are opening their mouths.
They haven't. There have been just as many fucking crazies on the Democratic side as there are on the Republican side. There are shit tons of crazies everywhere. Okay. They're just not religious crazies typically. Although there are plenty of crazy religious fucks on the Democratic side. They're all a bunch of social justice warrior wingnut crazies. Right. Different kind of crazy, just as crazy.
Right.
So, they're all crazy. It's just, the whole fucking country is just a shit pile anymore. Let's nuke the site from orbit. That's the only way to be sure.
Exactly.
Oh god, these people all need to die. Speaking of somebody who needs to die though.
Yes. Our buddy, our pal, Gordon Klingenschmitt, the demon-obsessed anti-gay exorcist, wins GOP primary in Colorado. Yeah, last year, Dr. Chaps announced that he would be running for a seat in the Colorado legislature, and his long journey as a disgraced former Navy chaplain who brags about having successfully performed an exorcism on a lesbian soldier, and who has stated again and again that demonic spirits are behind everything from abortion to gay marriage, to ENDA, to President Obama, to Madonna, won him the support of the vast majority of GOP caucus goers earlier this year, setting up a primary showdown against another GOP hopeful, which took place last night, and this was from June 25th. Klingenschmitt won the primary race by several hundred votes, becoming the official Republican nominee for House District 15 in Colorado House of Representatives. I was just, cause in here, this was, I know they had the the numbers here. Yeah, Klingenschmitt had 3,472 votes versus Williams 3,128 votes.
Which is not a huge number.
That is, yeah, that's the thing, that it's a small number, and I don't know how they district there, or, I mean, if it's supposed, I don't know how, this is a state district, so I don't know how they structure it, how many people have to be in a district. We may be talking, if this is the whole GOP went out to vote, I think he's got a snowball chance in hell to getting elected, but, this guy is certifiably crazy. I'm surprised he has some debt from the primary race. He owes $4,138 in printing costs. Oh, yeah. This is the guy who believes Obamacare causes cancer, that the Bible commands people to own guns in order to defend themselves against left-wing crazies, and the FCC is allowing demonic spirits to molest and visually rape your children. He's now running as a Republican candidate for office.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm honestly hoping that the idiots in Colorado only voted for him because it was the lesser of the two evils running in the primary. I went and looked up this Dave Williams guy he was running against, and he's just as wingnut religious crazy as Klingenschmitt. They're both like that. They're both whack jobs. So I'm hoping that they kind of went for him only because maybe he was a better known whack job. I don't know. But please tell me the people of Colorado aren't fucking stupid enough to vote this asshole into office. Please.
I would like to think, is Colorado liberal?
No, it's Crazy Train. Yeah. They're pure anti-gay nut jobs. They're the South, not in the South. Them in Kansas. I mean, there's a bunch of them. I don't think they're as bad as Mississippi, but they're still crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering, because I would hope somebody would just, point at him and says, "You're a fuckhead."
Yeah, well, they wouldn't care.
Nobody will care, though.
They'd be proud to be fuckheads.
Yeah, they'll probably print t-shirts.
I'm a fuckhead for Klingenschmitt. Shit, man, we should make those damn t-shirts and sell them.
There we go.
Market it toward Colorado. Yeah, make some money for the show. Not like we need it, but,
Yeah. Come up with one for every state, We'll start with Klingenschmitt and pick our favorite crazy from each state. Because this guy is just definitely, I've watched the videos, I've seen all the comments he's made. I don't know where he gets this stuff. I don't know if he's trying to appeal to the lowest denominator. I'm not even going to say common. It's the lowest of the low,
He's insane like everybody else.
Yeah. And that's about all you can say. It's sad to see that happening. Maybe the Democrats in that district will point him out for what he is, a retard.
Well, you gotta remember that with all the people leaving religion, the only people left are the crazies. So you're seeing more and more and more of these crazy stories because it's not being diluted by the people who are relatively sane.
That must be it.
So I think we're just going to keep seeing more and more and more insane people coming out making, religious statements and arguments and claims because fuck, they're all that's left.
Pretty much. Yeah, I can't go any further on this guy.
Yeah. Please, Colorado, do not vote for him when he goes up for election. But seriously, the guy's in a district of 7,000 people. Seriously? That's not impressive. I'm sorry. That's like Jim Bob and his 7 sister wives.
Oh.
Would you be surprised?
Not really. They're close to Utah.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. I don't even know what to even say any more about this guy. He's out there believing in demons and, all this stuff, and he's done exorcisms on lesbians. I don't know what the whole story is with him being kicked out.
Yeah, I went over that last time we talked about him, where he was kicked out for violating, naval regulations by wearing his uniform at a protest.
Right. Yeah, that was it.
It's called, dude, you're a dumb shit. You got what you deserved. Fuck you up the ass and go to hell. Well, actually, you can't go to hell because, it's like going, so that's like going, yeah, go to Valhalla. Yeah, that's, okay, sure, whatever floats your boat, dude.
Yeah, that or just go to District 15 in Colorado.
Yeah. That'd be nice. Maybe we'll launch him off into space.
I don't know.
I do not know. But let's go on. Because his insanity is just too much for me anymore.
Pretty much, yeah.
So now we'll just do a bunch of stories about how much religion is falling apart, because it is. Christian churches are going away in America, and they're being replaced by houses of worship from other religions, or by just being converted into office buildings. With the continuing slide of religion in America, many people are leaving their faith altogether, and the churches just can't keep their doors open with pews half empty, so they're going out of business left and right. How much longer before the church on every corner that defined much of America vanishes entirely and religious houses of worship become positively rare? Now, I did a blog post a while back on this in my area. All right, I went out because I noticed that there was a shit ton of churches for sale just in my area. And I live in a place where it's pretty religious, where there were tons of churches around. And there were lots of churches for sale. I mean, I think there was like 15 in my city alone. And if I expanded out, there was like 75 within like a 10-mile radius. I mean, even like the Berean Christian bookstore chain went under a couple years ago and got bought out. So this is all getting pretty nasty, where you're getting a bunch of churches just going away. Are you seeing that in your area?
Well, I haven't been home.
Well, I mean,
yeah, but
Detroit too, or, you know.
And Detroit, you know, I don't see too many churches. I mean, there's quite a few who are religious who I work with, and I do know a lot of the churches in Detroit are storefront types. So they probably come and go as needed. It doesn't seem to be a lot of, brick and mortar churches.
They probably burned all those down.
Yeah. Back home, there has been an uptick, but that was during the building boom. There were, I want to say there was church and church schools. 2 churches got built in our town, but I want to say, for the 2 churches, we got like 4 bars. So we used to have like a 50-50 ratio of bars to churches. Now there's more bars than there are churches, and
they're more useful, I'm sure.
Yeah. And they're not expanding as fast as, entertainment and stuff like that. So I think they're kind of holding their own, and I suspect one of the churches is actually, they built a larger place for themselves and sold off their old building. It may be just like, in a neutral stance in home. But I do see a little bit of an uptick on religious speech. Let's put it that way. There's been billboards going up against abortion, and there's one against the creation. Every time I drive home, there's that one billboard, believe that you're descended from apes, call this number and find the truth thing. So I want to say I don't know if it's just maybe more shifting from the old traditional religion to some of I think I've seen in some of these articles about, Pentecostals are getting a boost. Cause I do know that the Jehovah's Witnesses built a new building in Joliet. So maybe it's more of a shifting from old tradition to, new tradition.
Yeah, well, not necessarily, I don't think. I mean, we keep talking about how badly the Catholics are doing. 75% of Catholics attended weekly mass in 1955, which last week we said it was down to like 25%. Yeah. Latinos, who made up a huge portion of the Catholics, have been flooding away from Catholicism in droves, and a lot of them have been becoming evangelical Christians. So that might be why you're starting to see a growth in some Protestant factions, although a lot of them are becoming atheists. 33% of Latinos today consider themselves former Catholics, if that tells you anything about where they're going. Right. Catholicism is dead. Fuck you guys. And we've also talked about like the Southern Baptists and how their failure in recent years. Plus, there is a current war between Protestant and evangelical Christians. So it's really obvious that pretty much all of the Christian sects are falling apart. We are seeing that some are turning to Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, etc. But like I said, there's an awful lot of them who are just saying the hell with religion entirely. We're just going to become atheists, and that's kind of that.
Right.
So it's all going the right way. I'm still very, very surprised at how fast it's going. I don't know if we just hit some kind of critical mass and all of a sudden everything's falling apart in 10, 15 years or what. I was thinking it was going to take 100 years to get to the point we're at today. Who knows where we're going to be in 10 years?
Yeah. I mean, we could be unless there's some backlash. And I've seen articles, and I think I may have sent you some articles we'll talk about next week, but I think there's attempts at, fixing. The religious are trying to fix the problem, and it ain't working. I think the articles I sent, and when I comment on them, it's going to be, these guys just don't get a clue.
Oh yeah.
Their churches are falling apart. Religion's becoming less relevant to educated people. It's probably even becoming less relevant to working class people. I mean, I think the only ones that hang on to religion are probably those who are unemployed or unemployable. And I think that seems to be a common denominator. They don't have a clue enough to say, I should get an education. Maybe I can get out of this. I can't wash dishes for the rest of my life. I need to get a skilled job or something like that. But it's either go to school or pray to God, and hopefully he gives you the free handout.
Yeah.
And they don't get it. You gotta work for it to get what you want. Well, actually, there's been on one of the mailing lists I'm on, talking about homeschools. And, actually there's a question going about, and actually I haven't looked into it yet, but what percentage of homeschools are for actually smart parents wanting to teach smart kids, get them educated versus, the dumb parents who want to make sure their kids get the religious education. And I think because they're starting to find out that these kids that are getting the religious education are not coming out, but there's no real statistics. Homeschooling, and at least, for North Carolina, there are no standards for it. You could say, I'm going to homeschool my kids. And I mean, I think you have to make 2 proficiency tests that they have to take. I think one for grade school, one for high school, so they can get the diploma equivalent. But that's all they're required to do. They can fill those kids' heads full of religion. And actually, the state also, because I guess they deregulated homeschooling. When you give them these proficiency tests, they can actually cheat on these tests. You don't go to a school, to the regular school to administer these tests. You can take the test home, have the kid fill it out, and then send it into the state. There's no checks or balances. There's no, preventing cheating. There's nothing. I mean, it's really a screwed up deal. And so these kids are not getting educated. They're coming out with high school diplomas who probably, they could probably read and write, but they don't know anything beyond that. They don't know about science. The only science they know is creation science, which isn't a science, but, to them, it is. But again, there's no statistics to really say what's going on. I mean, we don't know. And these people are coming out. They don't understand the world. They don't understand basic stuff. They're flocking to these churches, but that's because they're not educated. They only know Bible school, and, they really can't function. So they stick with the school, not get educated. They're trapped in this, this religious world. That's the only way that these churches can stay alive, is to dumb their people down.
Of course. Yeah, they don't want people to go to school. Like you were talking about with the homeschools, I'm trying to remember the exact where it was, but for most areas, if I remember correctly, you don't ever have to take any kind of proficiency exam or anything else. You come out, and as long as your parent signs off your report card that you've passed all of their criteria, you get a diploma. You never, ever, ever have to prove to anybody that you've actually learned anything. And the only people who ever really come out of homeschools and go on to take like an SAT or anything like that are the people who are planning on going on to college. And so that you get this weighted, result, because these kids come out and they will go to a high school and they'll take their test, but you're only getting the people who are intelligent. Right. You're getting the smartest kids out of homeschools. And so you're not really testing all homeschoolers. You're only testing the smartest ones. And that's why people go, oh, look, these kids are so smart. No, because you're not testing the stupid ones, which are probably the majority. So they're getting a worse education. And yeah, their churches want to keep them dumb and ignorant, because otherwise they're leaving the churches. It's the only way to keep them giving money to these churches.
Right. Yeah, because that was the big thing in that discussion was that, you know, there are people who are intelligent, they're professors and so on. They don't want their kids in the public schools because their kids are bright. All parents believe their kids are bright, but these kids were, you know, intelligent. They would, I think it's anecdotal, but I guess there was one, it was a professor and his wife homeschooling their kids. Their kids were like 3 years advanced, but somehow something happened. You know, someone decided to put the kids 1 year into public school, and two of the kids excelled. They were beyond. There was one kid that did have problems. Okay, so these kids were, when they were put into school, and they were right there with their peers moving on. Watching Jesus Camp. I must be a masochist or a sadist or something because going through all that stuff. But watching what these homeschooled kids are learning, it has nothing to do with education. It's indoctrination. There's no plans for college for these people, so.
Yeah, it's too bad they haven't come up with home college yet.
Yeah.
That should be next.
Well, yeah, that's what is it? What's his name? Got his PhD from that creationist guy.
Probably a lot of creationist guys. They get them from these religious diploma mills.
Yes. There you go. They've got them.
I can't wait till they come up with that, because that's the next logical step, you know. Home college. We don't actually teach you anything, but we'll claim we did, and then, you know, God maybe mysteriously, magically made you understand this stuff. And then you can go out into the working world being a complete ignorant fucktard.
Yep.
Yeah, well, anyway. Speaking of dying churches, let's do the next story.
Okay. How dying churches can find new life. For years, a handful of members of the Hillview Baptist Church in Franklin, Tennessee, prayed their pews would be filled with worshipers. Early June, those prayers were finally answered as more than 300 people gathered for Sunday morning service. But the pews were gone. So were the traditional hymns and the new sign outside the church that now bore the name Conduit Church. A few weeks earlier, the congregation of Hillview had voted to merge with Conduit, a 4-year-old non-denominational church. At the time, Hillview had dwindled to less than 24 members, and that was on the verge of shutting down. They were tired, said Darren Taylor, pastor of Conduit, and they knew their strategy wasn't working. Instead of closing down, Hillview became one of a small but growing number of struggling evangelical congregations who found new life by teaming up with a larger church. The mergers allow small churches to reinvent themselves and bigger ones to extend their reach. One building closes up, everyone moves to another building. It kind of works out for everybody.
Yeah, but that doesn't make any sense to me, because you had this evangelical church that essentially went out of business and was bought out by a non-denominational.
Yeah.
Okay, so the evangelicals lost.
True. That's what we want. It is weird that non-denominational could pull it off, I guess. And I wonder if they're going to bank on that, and other, you know, smaller churches, when they start folding up, roll them in.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I mean, they got to go someplace. The craziest that remain have to go someplace.
Right.
I mean, I'd much rather see these churches just go out of business and be able to use these storefronts as something useful.
Right.
Tear this shit down and build something that's actually worthwhile there. But, you know, if they can keep open, I don't care. You know, I know there's one church locally that did that. They now have 4 different churches in a 5-mile radius because they bought up a bunch of failing churches and split up their congregation. Which seems kind of stupid to me, but, you know, instead of having like 500 people in a church, they've got like 125 people in 4 churches or something. They're not any bigger than they used to be, but
right.
But they're just taking up more space. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing I've seen is a bunch of churches that will share the same building, where you'll get 5 or 6 different denominations in the same church building, where one church goes from, you know, 9 to 10, one church goes from 10 to 11, one church goes from 11 to 12. Yeah. And they'll just keep trading off.
Right. Did I send you that article about there's actually a Christian, Islamic, and Jewish building going up?
No, but I know I've seen that article.
Okay. I'll find it. They're actually bringing the different religions together under one roof. I mean, I would love to see how that plays out.
Yeah, well, they can't afford to do it separately because there aren't enough people to keep the doors open.
Yeah.
That's a really good thing, you know?
Yeah.
one problem for these churches beyond the continual failure of religion is that there's just too many damn churches out there. I mean, there was a time when there were almost as many churches as gas stations. I think things are now starting to balance out and most of the smaller churches are dying off. But still, that's pretty sad when it comes to religion. The religious is just going, we cannot keep our doors open. We've got 20 people in this building and that's not enough money to keep paying the property taxes and, keeping the lights on. Well, guys, maybe that's a message. Maybe that's supposed to be telling you something that, guys, you believe a bunch of stupid shit and nobody's falling for it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Wake up and smell the coffee. It's game over, man. Game over.
Wake up and snort the incense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, every week we do stories about religion falling apart and we just keep people, you get the crazies like Klingenschmitt doubling down on insanity, but more and more people, it seems, are just walking away from religion.
Definitely. And like I said, I haven't really seen it a lot in my area, but then again, we do have a Catholic university. We do have a pretty strong Catholic base, Joliet. And these are old timers, so it's more, I would say it's more waiting for them to shake the mortal coil than anything.
Yeah, well, that's how it always is though.
Right. It's sounding like, I would say in Joliet's case, that's what's going to have to happen for churches to go away. But, when you're getting into the Bible Belt and, the congregations are drying up and having to, people having to find some place to go and with the merging and so on, that seems like a whole new wrinkle to all this, that these churches are not, I don't know if it's people moving out of the areas to find jobs, if it's, or people just realizing there doesn't seem to be any demographic moves. I haven't seen anything yet. I haven't looked either, so I don't know. But if there's any big demographic move, like, instead of, evangelicals centered here, now they're moving into the East Coast, or they're moving out to the West Coast, or they're settling in the Southwest. I don't see anything talking about that there's no uptick here and there's a downtick there. So I think it's just a general people just throwing their hands up and saying, I've had enough of this, and moving on to more saner pastures.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping so anyway.
Yeah.
It's just people who are in these churches, they tend to be really, really old. Now, last week I went ahead and posted a picture of my old church. And it didn't have any people in the picture, but I looked at some other pictures and I would have to say that probably 80 to 90% of the people in that church are probably over 70 years old. And when they die, unless they can find some more people to fill those pews, that church is dead. And I don't know if it's the same for your former church or not, but you still have to send me a picture.
I gotta get home maybe I can get a picture from out front.
Well, you can just look online. I'm sure there's a picture online. That's what I did.
I couldn't find one, actually.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'll get something.
That's fine. But, I think it's just that the very religious crowd is aging and you're going to end up seeing a massive die-off and there's just not that many people to replace them.
Oh, exactly. And, because I don't see any demographic moves. I don't see anything changing. So I'm pretty sure you got the old timers going away and the younger set is realizing, those who are getting an education are realizing I don't need to be in a church. You might have those, they may rather watch it on TV, turn on the 700 Club and that's how they get their, religion from. But, other than that, the churches people are moving away. They're moving away from it. Where are they going to? I'm not sure if they're picking up something else or actually embracing atheism or agnosticism or whatever. I'd like to see some numbers on it, I guess, and maybe see what's really going on. I mean, I'm sure it is, attrition to age and people not picking up the calling.
Well, we already know that a lot of people are just giving up on religion. All the studies show that atheism is the fastest growing demographic in, quote unquote religious demographic. But I'm sure that there's a lot of people who've just given up on religion who are just holding on to the name for social reasons.
Right.
They're cultural Christians or cultural Catholics or however, Dawkins said it, who don't really believe in it anymore, but they're just so used to holding that name that they're just going to continue to call themselves that, whether they believe it or not.
That, and there may be some, backlash for abandoning religion. They might be hanging on to it just to keep their jobs. It's kind of sad it has to be like that, but, I'm pretty sure that there's those out there too. So,
yeah, and they just don't want their neighbors to think bad of them. Whether or not their neighbors would think bad of them or not, they're just going to continue to pretend, whether they believe it or not. So, yeah, I would give religion 20 years in this country.
Definitely.
Until we're just down to little pockets of stupid.
That would be so nice.
And speaking of little pockets of stupid, we should probably move on.
Yes.
In the Hobby Lobby case, and I should also note that it was clarified by the Supreme Court that the Hobby Lobby case was not just limited to the 4 types of contraception that Hobby Lobby mistakenly thought caused abortions. The Supreme Court clarified the next day that it involved all contraceptive care, even the ones that the stupid Hobby Lobby people knew didn't cause abortion. It applies to all contraceptive care that exists, essentially, and is offered by insurers without a copay. In that Hobby Lobby case, the argument by the 5 male Catholic conservative justices who ruled in favor of this corporation and its religious soul, they said that the government has an easy remedy for Hobby Lobby's refusal to, engage with health insurance that provides this, because they had an option, and that option, of course, was to simply not get the tax benefit for offering their employees health insurance. That easy remedy by the government was a system set up by the HHS for exemption for religious organizations like Catholic hospitals, which are arguably more of a religious nature. The day after Hobby Lobby was issued, maybe it was 2 days, Wheaton College made the argument to the Supreme Court that the idea that they would have to fill out a form for this religious exemption to the HHS was also an offense to their religious sensibilities, because by filling out the form, it then alerted the government, which would then alert the insurance agent and would then require the insurance agent to offer contraceptive care as a rider separate from the insurance that in this instance, college was offering. The insurance companies will eat the cost of this because ultimately it saves them money. But the idea that filling out the form then became an offense to their religiousness in an extraordinary, I think they call it an extraordinary emergency ruling. They ruled that this was, in fact, an offense to their religious sensibilities. And it took just about 5 days for them, the Supreme Court, the 5 white male Catholic justices, to say that the reason why they found the Hobby Lobby thing in the manner they did was because that there was already a government exemption, so the state did not show that it was necessary to compel Hobby Lobby to offer this health insurance.
All right. We had to talk about the recent Hobby Lobby Supreme Court decision sometime, so here we go. The Catholic-heavy Supreme Court found that Catholic companies, which is a stupid concept in the first place, can decide not to provide specific kinds of birth control to its employees if it violates their religious morals. Of course, this doesn't apply to anything outside of birth control, but we know that's coming. Other religions are now demanding that their religious sensibilities are just as deserving of respect as the Catholics, and the way the Supremes worded their decision, they're probably going to get their way too. Holy shit, this is going to be a giant-ass clusterfuck.
Yeah, I would have been willing to give the Supreme Court justices, if there was some kind of a constitutional reason. Here they clearly screwed up. They totally screwed this one up. We're not talking about semantics, but we're talking they just literally, and their track record is that, my opinion is that they're trying to create a real, turning a corporation into a living entity as opposed to a paper entity. trying to make the corporate entity is as legal as you or me, which means they can argue on religious ground. Because we've seen it with campaign reform, or not reform, but that corporations are allowed to make donations to political campaigns, PACs, whatever. They're being granted rights that we would normally enjoy. The corporation can now enjoy. It just makes no sense, and I don't see what constitutional basis they have for it. I don't see any real legal basis other than the fact that there are probably laws on the books that argue for this, but the door's open now for every corporation to file objections to whatever they feel is, against their religious. They can claim civil right violations if they wanted to, because now they've got a Supreme Court that will probably okay it. We're looking at something really bad. Really,
oh yeah.
I would believe that, that they did look at, that these guys understood the Constitution, they understood the law, and they would do what's right for minorities or those who cannot defend themselves. This court had done none of that, and everybody's fucked. I don't care who you are or whatever your orientations are. We are fucked. The next case that comes down the pike, it's going to be the same thing. The corporate entity is going to be getting more rights. I heard that I forget what organization is trying to get a sponsorship for a bill to overturn that decision. If that passed, I wouldn't be surprised that the Supreme Court will turn around and when it becomes tested, throw that law out. I mean, that's what this court is, between Scalia and Long Dong Silver. I mean, we're basically fucked. And those are the two guys, Thomas and Scalia, who are fucking us over.
Yeah. But what we're seeing here is just more evidence that the Supreme Court is completely corrupt. It's their job to interpret cases in light of the Constitution and only the Constitution. They're not doing that. They're voting on party and religious lines. You had, in this case, Catholic men voting against women justices. Every single Catholic man voted for it. Every single female justice voted against it. All right? This isn't how the Supreme Court is supposed to work. The Constitution spells out how they're supposed to operate. This ain't it. It's time to fucking abolish the goddamn court. It is time to throw their asses out and start over and get rid of this stupid idea that political parties get to put in their own people to vote their own way. We need to have a completely separate, independent entity putting people in the court, because this is just fucking not working. It's just not working.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, I would have defended it a month or two ago, but after this latest ruling, it's clearly it's a renegade court. They have no interest whatsoever in any type of basic human rights. They don't get or understand the basic tenets of the Constitution. And I think that should be, to be honest, I think it maybe can almost an act of treason, because they swore to uphold the Constitution when they were sworn in as justices. They are not doing it. They should be either up for treason or being impeached or something.
Yeah, but they can't be. They can't be. They're there for life. You can't do a damn thing about it. You can't remove them. You can't do anything about it. That's how it's written. So they get free reign to do whatever the fuck they want to do. And that's a problem.
I mean, that's a real problem. But certainly they violated their oaths of office.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't give a shit. Every goddamn person in there is, what do I as a person want to do? It's not, what does the Constitution direct me to do? It's, what the fuck do I want to do today?
Yeah.
And it's sad. And, and the problem is that this specific decision has really opened the door to some insanity. The decision says that people who have religious beliefs, whether or not they're part of the actual religious views of their religion, can practice anything they want. Now, in this, it says specifically with regards to Obamacare, but what stops people from just declaring that their religion doesn't allow them to pay taxes? Hey, my religion doesn't allow me to pay taxes. Granted, I'm an atheist. I don't have to prove it. I don't have to show that my religion says that. I can just say my religious belief insists this. Now, of course, they did say that you can't do that, but you can't really make that argument to say, hey, you have a religious freedom to do X, Y, and Z, but only here, there, and the other place. you got prisoners out at Guantanamo who are already petitioning to be able to hold group prayers during Ramadan and just get everybody together in a giant group because of this ruling. What's going to stop people from going, hey, my religion says I get to take any drugs I want. I want to shoot up heroin. What's to stop people from saying, hey, my religion says I get to go out and shoot people, or I get to discriminate against gays or blacks or whatever? What's to stop any of this? Because they've opened that door.
Yeah. Certainly not the Supreme Court, because actually, even on top of it, even if you did go out, okay, my religion says I can, shoot up heroin. I get arrested, I go to court, I go through the system, and if my lawyer's good and the other lawyer sucks, he could turn around and says, hey, because they made this ruling, I don't know what the case is, the state versus Hobby Lobby, they can now quote that and says, you said in your decision that we can do this. See, I wouldn't be surprised that, Hobby Lobby had really good lawyers and whoever was defending it had suck lawyers. I mean, that could very well be the problem, half the problem, but you definitely have these, definitely Scalia and Thomas are probably the worst of all of them. Now that it's open, you can test it, as this whole, the Guantanamo Bay, wanting to petition, whether it reaches the Supreme Court, they can still cite, the Supreme Court said this, and keep appealing. And, they can't, it'll take a while, but the Supreme Court said this is their ruling. I would say that any, lower court, they might try, I don't know, because
the lower courts can't disagree with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, what they said is now the law of the land everywhere.
Right.
Sorry.
Right. But you know what? The way they're doing things now, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised that you don't get a lower court activist who's going to say, fuck you, Supreme Court. This is a bad law, and rule against it. And, I would love to see that. I mean, I really would.
Yeah, but it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter because they get overridden. It's already a done deal.
I would like to see the lower courts when the next test and they try to use Hobby Lobby case, I would love to see these guys literally, I mean, I would love to see the guy thumb at their nose at the Supreme Court and saying, I am not going to follow this ruling.
At which point in time they'll lose their jobs because this ruling is the law of the land. That's like saying, I don't want to do what the president says. Fuck you. Too bad. You don't have a choice.
Actually, that lower courts can do that. They can do it. I am almost sure that a lower court can say, Supreme Court, you're fucked up. And
no, they can't.
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. I bet you they can.
Well, they can say anything they want, but that ruling will never stand.
So it goes up for more appeals and they go through more,
and
stuff.
It'll get overturned, up the ladder.
Right.
It's still going to get overturned.
If you can get it back in front of those justices again and say, this is what's wrong with your ruling, you can.
And they'll just go, fuck you. It's our ruling. You're done. Or what they'll do is they'll just refuse to hear it.
Right. But then it'll be the court before it that ruling would stand. And then I am sure that our federal judge, all the judges can fight this thing. I think they can and they should try. At least in this case. They can find ways of twisting, I don't know, I don't want to say use twisting, but they could make it sound like even though the Hobby Lobby says this, it doesn't apply to this, henceforth this law does not apply in this case. So I'm going to rule this way. So they can push that law off to the side. So now can prisoners have the right to do that? It may suck, but I think the lower courts have ways of fighting this ruling. If they really wanted to, they could do it.
Oh, I wouldn't do that. If we want to change this, the only way to really do it is to let things go crazy. And basically just say, okay, why don't we have 1,000 companies file a class action lawsuit that says our religion says we don't have to provide any health care at all. Hell, we don't have to pay overtime. We don't have to follow federal labor guidelines. Our religion says we don't have to follow the EPA guidelines. We don't have to do all this shit. Guess what you guys just set up? You guys just set up for anybody to say, hey, my religion, even a religion I made up 3 minutes ago, I get to violate any law I damn well please because I claim to have a religion. Because they specifically said, you don't have to actually prove that this religion exists. You just have to claim it as a religious belief. That's the only way this is going to change, if it ruins things to such a degree that they get such political pressure to reverse their finding. But the only one that can reverse it is them. They are the only one. There is nobody who can override them. The president can't do it. Congress can't do it. Nobody can do it. We've set up the system that way.
Yeah, I would just like to see somebody just say,
yeah, but that's not something we want either. I mean, we do not want activist judges. We don't want activists in the Supreme Court. We don't want activists on the bench at all. We want people who are going to rule based on the law. You're now arguing that you want a bunch of judges in lower courts to do the same damn things that we're arguing against them doing in the Supreme Court. I don't really buy into that, sorry.
Because really,
my religious belief is that my company we can sacrifice 5 employees on Friday on an open fire. See how long that one goes.
Yeah. Oh man, I don't know. But I really would love to see the courts sort this one out. I would like to see somebody saying, you know what, our Supreme Court fucked up on this one. I would think maybe there are some really weird twists you can put into it. It's, you're dealing with case law and you can do stuff. You have ways of playing with it where you can say, well, even though such and such the Hobby Lobby says this ruling in this case says you can't. And this ruling says this, and this ruling says that. And you could build a case where you could argue that the Supreme Court messed up. Of course, it has to then go up the chain, of course, but at least ways now, it's within the courts. They can argue it. They can argue it legally because as they do that arguing, those arguments follow along with the case. And then when it's thrown in front of the Supremes, they look at it and, they could do whatever with it.
All they have to do is say, yep, we were right the first time. Fuck you.
Right. But it's certainly, I'm thinking in terms of building enough case law underneath it that would almost undermine the Supreme Court's ruling so that even though the Supremes say this, you may be able to minimize it enough where it can only be applied to Catholic craft shops. And
which is illegal right there. You can't do that.
Right. But again, if you have a Jewish craft shop, yeah, you're not bound by that law. I mean, I'm looking for something like that where you can minimize this debacle because if it isn't minimized, we're fucked.
Oh, I agree we're fucked, but the problem is minimizing it doesn't help because it's just going to keep getting shuffled up the ladder. The Jewish craft shop who's trying to use this law to justify some kind of discrimination that they want to perform against somebody else, they're not going to go, oh, well, this doesn't apply to me. Well, they want it to apply to them. So if you find that it doesn't apply to them, they're just going to kick it up the ladder until they find a court, including the Supremes, who are going to say, yep, that applies to you.
I'm wondering, how hard it is to get a work visa in Canada or something like that, or work up on the, North Shore or something like that. Just be away from the insanity that's going to break out in this country because clearly we've got a Supreme Court that is totally clueless and has no compassion to the American people and they're only serving their corporate overlords.
Yeah, but their job isn't to have compassion. That's the thing. Their job has nothing to do with compassion. Their job has to do with interpreting things in light of the Constitution. That's their only job. That's all they do. They're not supposed to think about it. They're not supposed to react about it. They're not supposed to apply religion to it or politics or anything else. They're supposed to take a case and say, what does the Constitution have to say about this case? That's it. Full stop. They're not doing that. If they were doing that, this shit would never happen. The fact is they're not doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. If they're trying to apply compassion and all this other shit to a job that they don't even have, they need to stop that. That's why they're fucking up. They need to just go back and do the job that they're hired to do. I mean, otherwise we're just going to keep getting these damn cases where they're just going to keep doing things because they're Catholics or because they're women or because they're whatever. Because they like to smoke cigarettes or, drink beer or whatever. Right. So as, we're ruling because we like beer. So that's how we're going to rule on this case. And, we happen to like this TV show, so we're going to rule on that case. That's not what they're supposed to do. That's all supposed to be left outside the courtroom. They're not allowed to use any of that. This whole country is just fucked up. And, the government has allowed this to happen. And Jesus, man, we need a fucking full-scale revolution anymore. We need to nuke it all and start over.
I'm not at that point yet, but I'm pretty damn close.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad. It really, really is.
Yeah, I can't say any more about it.
Okay. All right, well, let's go ahead and finish up our last story and...
Yeah, this is an interesting one from CBC News. This is Canadian Broadcasting Corporation from February 21st, 2000.
That's an old one.
Yeah, I just noticed that. But why is it like, why does that say 2000? I thought that just popped up because there's this, you know what? I don't want to do this story. I mean, it is a fucked up story where, a church, had a food bank, running a food bank but they were doing it without a pastor or anybody running it. So when a pastor took over and started trying to reorganize it, shut down the food bank. This is the real story because the original story, and that may have been why when I found the story that sent me here did come out and they were claiming, yeah, okay, this is a fucked up. This is one I think I just got hosed on. I'm now believing that because there was a story about how the church was saying that they didn't want poor people around because it was a bad image. Yeah, let's not do this story because I just realized this. I just got caught in a hoax story.
Okay.
I mean, I could talk more about how fucked up this is. Or just the story itself, the social justice bullshit that goes on. I mean, this is probably one of those where somebody thought it would be a bright idea to, I mean, I'm all for going after these churches and, the religions for the bullshit they do. And that's the type of stories I'm looking for. I know you're looking for. These are the stories we talk about. Then to have somebody outside, I like to think I'm pretty passionate about, these stories and why we should be, concerned. It bugs me that somebody will make up a story, make it worse than it really is. I mean, it's bad enough. I mean, these stories are bad enough. And you can find real stories of these quote unquote good people who do bad things to people. You don't need to embellish it. You don't need to add to it. I know we talked about it at the beginning of the show. Well, let's end it. I mean, I'm ready to end the show on this idea because if I didn't look that close to this article, I would have fucked up. And it pisses me off that, and this is not because of somebody. I mean, I screwed up and just didn't look at the date. But you know what? Whoever came up with the story, or who came up with the original story about how they kicking out homeless people because they were dirty and, that was the basic idea. This church kicked them out because they were dirty and had no money. You don't need to do that, people. It serves no purpose. It makes you look like an idiot. And then if you defend yourself because this is socially correct or, whatever the argument is, or your reasons. I'm doing it because we need to destroy religion. No, religion's destroying itself. It doesn't need any more help from anybody other than themselves. They're doing it themselves. They're going down. We don't need to be pushing it along because then it makes us look bad that we're bringing the news. And I really just don't, it just bothers me that there's those people who think, oh, if we add this to the story or we modify this picture. I mean, I'm amazed. There was a while ago about the Occupy movement. And there was a guy who posted this photo of it looked like millions of people standing in a street corner on Wall Street, protesting the March on, all this stuff. And, the nice thing about the internet, you could do a Google search for the image, found out it was a photo from, Google Earth. You could see the one person in there, and whoever got a hold of this picture copied that one person 1 million times. Of course, after catching him and finding the guy and saying, this is a hoax picture, the guy got belligerent. It's not the photo that's the problem. It's the message that, he was arguing that the message was important. The message is okay, but don't do it dishonestly.
Yeah, the message is you're a dishonest prick.
Yeah. Like I said, and then, like we talked in the beginning, but it's dishonest. It's, I don't know why people insist on doing these kinds of things. It serves no purpose. You actually tick off the people that you're trying to have on your side. I mean, I can't defend it. If you're going to be a dickhead and post a hoax story, or you're going to post a hoax video or photo, I can't support your idea. I mean, I would love to see some more accountability on Wall Street. I'd like to see more accountability in our government, in our courts and everything. You're not going to convince me by lying to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. But I mean, with this story, I was looking at it, and there's got to be more to it than what they're saying. And I know this is an old story now. I didn't catch the date either, so it's just as much my fault as yours. But, I mean, was like the church going out of business? Were they losing members? Or what I'm starting to think is, did the church just turn into little more than a secular food bank, and the new leadership who came along, they wanted to regain control? I'm starting to think that this was more about control than about, we just don't like poor people hanging around.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it was, hey, we're new. We got to make changes. We got to get everybody to get in line and follow us and do what we say. And yeah, it's kind of a shame that the church doesn't want to help people. It just wants to sit around and pray. I mean, their whole thing was, we want to pray more. Okay. Well, while there's a whole bunch of people out there starving, why don't you pray while you're helping them? Because obviously, for as long as this has worked before you little fucktards came along, it was working pretty damn well. Yep. I'd be more than happy if they just shut the damn church down and just opened a food bank.
Yeah. I don't know why they can't run a food bank and have services at the same place. Or a lot of these storefronts here in Detroit do. They bring in the homeless, give you a bowl of soup, piece of bread, and then they preach to you all night,
Yeah, well, they're just trying to use you. Well, they're trying to convert you when you're most vulnerable. Yeah. That's the problem with a lot of these religious fucks. But, I'd rather just get rid of the religion entirely and just help people. And apparently there was a bunch of people here who were only too happy to do that. Yeah. So let's do that instead. Let's just get rid of the religion and just help people. It just makes more sense.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, we need more of that. I can't say anything more to that.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and close up for the week. That's all the news fit to bitch about for the week. But never fear, we'll be back in another week with another show full of conservative atheist goodness. You can find us everywhere. Just look. But once you find us, make sure you tell everyone about us. That you can. Stop people on the street. We wouldn't mind. Until next week and our next exciting foray into religious and political stupidity, take care.
Good night, everyone.
You've been listening to the Bitchspot Report podcast with your hosts, Cephas and Mike. You can follow us on Twitter respectively at Bitchspot1 or at JDRipper1962. Please visit our website at report.jdragononline.com. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Bitchspot Report. We're also on Google+, iTunes, and YouTube. Those links are at our website. We'd love to hear from you. You can reach us via email at report@jdragononline.com. Comments, ideas, and suggestions are always welcome. We'll be back next week with another fun and fact-filled episode. Please tune in again.